The thing about the Cold War is that nobody ever really believed it would stay cold forever. I remember sitting in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning, watching the news on a small black and white television, and the reporter was talking about something in Berlin. Something about checkpoints and tensions and the usual language everyone used back then. I poured my coffee and thought, not for the first time, that eventually someone was going to make a mistake. A real one. The kind that doesn't get walked back with diplomatic cables and carefully worded statements. That was 3 weeks ago. Now I sit in this radio booth, in this small station on the edge of a town nobody has ever heard of, and I wonder if the mistake already happened, and we just haven't figured out the full shape of it yet. My name is Arthur. I used to be the overnight host here, the voice that came on after midnight when the real DJs had gone home and the only people still awake were truckers, insomniacs, and people who couldn't sleep for reasons they didn't like to talk about. I played old records, took requests, read the weather when the weather mattered. It was a quiet job, a good one. The station is called Shakespeare, though the call letters don't mean anything anymore. Nobody's listening to the branding. They're just listening for a voice that isn't their own, for proof that someone else is still out there in the dark. I found the frequency by accident. 3 days after the broadcast stopped, after the television went to snow and the regular radio stations went to static, and the emergency alert system sputtered out a few garbled words before dying completely, I was sitting in my apartment with a portable radio I'd bought at a garage sale years ago. I was turning the dial, not really expecting to find anything, just needing to hear something other than silence. And then I heard it, a voice, faint, crackling, bleeding through the static like a signal from somewhere very far away. It wasn't in English. I don't know what language it was, exactly. Something Eastern European, maybe. Russian, or Polish, or Ukrainian. I couldn't tell. The signal was too weak, the voice too distant. But I understood the tone. I understood the fear beneath the words, the careful, measured way the voice was speaking, like someone trying to keep themselves calm while standing at the edge of something very deep. I listened for an hour, 2 hours. The voice came and went, fading in and out, sometimes clear enough to make out individual words I didn't recognize, sometimes dropping to nothing but static, and the faint suggestion of a human presence behind it. When the broadcast finally ended, there was a long pause, and then something I did recognize. A single word, spoken slowly, clearly, as if the speaker wanted to make absolutely certain that anyone listening would understand. Remember. And then the signal cut out completely. That was the first night. I've been listening ever since. I brought my portable radio to the station the next day. I knew the building would be empty. The staff had all gone home when the power failed, when the phones went dead, when the world started sliding sideways and nobody knew who to call or what to do. The station manager left a note on the door that said, "Gone to check on family," and nothing else. The janitor was the last person I saw, and he was locking up the supply closet and muttering something about his wife in Chicago, about how he needed to find a way to get to her. I stayed. I don't know why. Maybe because the station felt like the only thing that still made sense. The only place where I had a job to do, a purpose, a reason to keep turning on the transmitter and speaking into the microphone, even if nobody was listening, even if I was just talking to myself and the static. But the frequency changed everything. I've been trying to figure out where it's coming from. The signal is strongest at night, between midnight and dawn. During the day it fades almost completely, just ghostly fragments of sound that could be anything. But at night, when the rest of the world is dark and quiet, the voice comes through clear enough to follow. I've started keeping a log, a notebook, the old-fashioned kind with lined paper and a pen that doesn't need batteries. I write down everything I hear, even when I don't understand it. I've started to notice patterns. Certain phrases that repeat, certain pauses that feel significant. The voice always ends with that single word, remember, like a benediction, like a warning. I don't know who the speaker is. I don't know if they're broadcasting from a bunker somewhere, from a submarine, from a hidden transmitter in the mountains. I don't know if they're military or civilian, official or rogue. I don't know if they're the last voice of a dying government, or just one frightened person with a radio and a message they can't stop repeating. But I know they're scared. I can hear it in the way their voice tightens when they talk about certain things. I can hear it in the silences, the long pauses where they seem to be listening to something off mic, something I can't hear. I've started broadcasting myself, not on the same frequency. I don't have the technical know-how to do that, but on the station's regular frequency, the one I've been using since the beginning. I talk back. I tell whoever might be listening that there's a signal out there, a voice in the static, something worth paying attention to. I tell them what I've heard, what I've learned, what I'm still trying to understand. I tell them to remember. That's what I'm doing now. Sitting in this booth with the microphone in front of me and the transmitter humming softly, speaking to an audience I can't see and can't count, hoping that somewhere out there, someone is listening. The town is quiet. The power grid is down, has been down since the first day. The streets are dark, the houses are dark. Sometimes I see lights in the distance, candlelight or lanterns or small fires in metal drums. People are still here. I see them during the day, moving carefully through the streets, carrying supplies, keeping their heads down. There's no panic. Not yet, just a slow, deliberate stillness, like everyone is holding their breath and waiting for something. I don't know what we're waiting for. A signal, maybe. An announcement. A sign that the world isn't ending, that it's just changing, that there's still a way forward. That's what I hope the frequency is. A sign. A thread connecting us to someone, somewhere, who knows more than we do. Someone who wants us to remember something important, something we might have forgotten in all the chaos and fear. I've been thinking about the phrase itself. Remember. It's such a simple word. It could mean anything. Remember the past. Remember who you were. Remember what you're fighting for. Remember that you're not alone. I don't know. I don't know anything for certain. But I know the voice is still there, every night, speaking words I can't fully understand in a language I'm trying to piece together. I know the signal still holds steady, even when everything else has gone silent. And I know I'm going to keep listening, keep broadcasting, keep trying to connect the dots between what I hear and what I fear. Because if there's one thing the Cold War taught us, it's that the scariest things aren't the ones we can see. They're the ones we can't. The signals we can't quite decode. The voices we can't quite place. The threats we can't quite name. That's where I am right now, on the edge of something I don't fully understand, speaking into the darkness, hoping someone out there is speaking back. My name is Arthur. You're listening to the radio during the Cold War, and this is what I've heard so far. I'll be here when the voice comes back. I'll be here when the signal strengthens and the words become clearer. I'll be here to tell you what I learned. Until then, I'm going to keep talking, keep broadcasting, keep holding on to this thread of sound that connects us to something larger than ourselves. If you can hear me, if you found this frequency, if you're sitting somewhere in the dark with a radio and a flicker of hope, I want you to know that you're not alone. I'm here. The voice is here. We're all here, waiting together for whatever comes next. So stay tuned, stay quiet, stay listening. And remember, the static is thin tonight. The signal is clear. The voice should be coming soon. I'll be right here when it does. The voice came back last night, clearer than before. I've been sitting in the booth since sunset, watching the darkness settle over the town like a blanket being pulled tight. No lights, no movement in the streets. Just the occasional flicker of a match or the distant sound of a door closing, soft and careful, like people were trying not to be heard. I turned on the transmitter at the usual time, said a few words into the microphone just to feel the vibration of my own voice in the room, and then I'd switched over to the portable radio and waited. The static started breaking apart around 11. I could hear it happening in real time, the hiss softening, the interference fading, the shape of something human beginning to emerge from the noise. It's always like that. Never sudden, always gradual. Like the voice has to push through layers of distance and silence before it can reach me. When it came through this time, it was stronger than I'd ever heard it. The words were still in that language I couldn't name, still tinged with that same careful, deliberate tone, but the signal itself was different, steadier, closer somehow, like the source had moved nearer to wherever I was sitting. I listened for an hour, taking notes in the dark. I've gotten better at recognizing certain patterns. The voice always starts with the same phrase, something that sounds like, "I am speaking," or "I am here." There's a pause after that, always the same length, like the speaker is giving anyone listening a moment to settle in. Then there's a long section I still can't translate, words that flow together in a rhythm I'm starting to recognize even if I can't understand the meaning. And then, at the end, that single word in English, "remember." But last night, something new happened. About halfway through the broadcast, the voice paused longer than usual. There was a rustling sound, paper being moved, and then the voice came back, slower this time, more deliberate, and the words were different. 4 days, the voice said, in English, broken, accented, like someone who'd learned the language from books and had never spoken it aloud until now. 4 days from now, there will be a thing, an event, something they did not tell us about, something they did not prepare. The voice stopped. I could hear breathing, shallow and quick. We have to remember, that is all. Remember, and tell others, before it is too late. 4 days. The signal wavered, the static rising up like a wave, and the voice was gone. Just like that, back to the hiss, and the silence, and the dark. I sat there for a long time after it ended, staring at the portable radio like it might offer some explanation I'd missed. 4 days, something they didn't tell us about, something they didn't prepare. The Cold War has always been about secrets. That's what I keep coming back to. The whole thing, the decades of tension and fear and carefully calibrated brinkmanship, it's all been built on things we don't know. Classified documents, need-to-know protocols, intelligence that never reaches the public because someone, somewhere, decided it would be better if we stayed in the dark. I've spent the morning trying to piece together what the voice might have meant. 4 days from when? From last night? From the day the broadcast stopped? From some calendar I don't have access to? And what kind of event? Something they didn't tell us about and didn't prepare for. That could be anything. A military exercise gone wrong, a miscalculation in some distant command center, an accident that became something worse. Or it could be what everyone's been afraid of since the beginning. The thing we've all been waiting for, even when we told ourselves we weren't. I've been to the library. I walked there this morning, through streets that felt too quiet, past houses with their curtains drawn and doors that stayed closed even when I passed. The library was unlocked, which surprised me. I found the reference section, the old books, the ones that were printed before everyone started trusting the internet to tell them what to know. I sat at a table with a stack of volumes on Cold War history and started reading about what people used to say when they talked about the worst-case scenarios. There was a lot I didn't remember. The drills, the fallout shelters, the civil defense pamphlets that told families how to build their own bunkers and stockpile enough food for 2 weeks. I found photographs of school children hiding under their desks, their faces serious and frightened, practicing for something nobody wanted to name. I found government documents, declassified years ago, that laid out evacuation plans for major cities and contingency strategies for post-attack governance, plans that assumed there would be something left to govern. The library had a basement. I found it at the end of a narrow corridor, a door that opened onto stairs that led down into darkness. There was a sign on the wall, faded and yellowed, that said, "Emergency Shelter," with an arrow pointing toward the lower level. I didn't go down. I stood at the top of the stairs, and looked into the dark and thought about all the things we prepare for without ever believing they'll actually happen. I've been thinking about the voice's choice of words. We have to remember, not we have to prepare, or we have to act, or we have to fight. Remember, like the most important thing we can do is hold on to something, some piece of knowledge or awareness that might otherwise be lost in the chaos. I told my neighbor this morning, a woman named Helena who lives in the apartment next to mine. She's in her 60s, has a grown son somewhere in the city that I haven't heard from since the broadcast stopped. I knocked on her door and asked if she had a few minutes to talk. She let me in, offered me a cup of cold water, and listened while I told her about the frequency and the voice and the message I'd received. She didn't look surprised. She looked like someone who'd been expecting something like this for a long time. I was a child, she said, during the Cuban Missile Crisis. I remember my mother filling the bathtub with water and telling me to be quiet. I remember my father packing a bag and putting it by the door. They didn't tell us why. They just said we might need to leave quickly, that we shouldn't ask questions, that we should trust that they would take care of us. She looked at me with eyes that had seen a lot of things I hadn't. We were all in the dark, she said, even the people who were supposed to know what was happening. That's what I remember most. Not the fear, the confusion, the feeling that nobody actually understood what was going on. That's what I feel now. Not just fear, though there's plenty of that, confusion, uncertainty, the sense that something is moving beneath the surface of the world, something I can't quite see or name, and the only thing I can do is listen and wait and try to understand. The frequency will come back tonight. It always does, and when it does, I'll be here, radio in hand, notebook open, ready to hear whatever the voice has to say. Maybe the message will be clearer tonight. Maybe the voice will tell me more about the 4 days, about the event I need to prepare for, about the remembering I need to do. Or maybe it'll just keep speaking in that language I can't translate, repeating words that feel familiar even when I don't understand them, ending with that single, simple command that's been echoing in my head since the beginning. Remember. I'm going to try. That's all I can do. Try to remember what I've learned, what I've heard, what I've been told. Try to hold on to the threads of information that might help me make sense of what's coming. 4 days. That gives me time. Not much, but enough maybe to figure out what I'm supposed to do. My name is Arthur. You're listening to the radio during the Cold War. And I'm still here, still listening, still trying to understand. I'll be back when I know more. I spent the morning drawing a map. Not a map of roads or rivers or towns. Those maps still exist. I could walk down to the gas station and find a folded paper version in the rack near the counter, if I wanted to. What I needed was a different kind of map. A map of signals. A map of connections. A map of the strange invisible geography that the voice was tracing through the static every night. I got the idea from something Walter used to say. Walter was the old engineer who kept the station's equipment running, back when there was still a station to run. He had a habit of talking about radio waves like they were living things, like they had personalities and preferences and routes they liked to travel. He'd stand in the equipment room with his hands on his hips and talk about skip distances and tropospheric ducting and all the ways a signal could bounce off the ionosphere and come down somewhere completely unexpected. Radio waves don't care about borders, he told me once. That's the thing people don't understand. They don't care about countries or checkpoints or who's allowed to talk to who. They just go, up and out and around, finding their own way through the dark. You can't stop them. You can only try to listen. I think about that a lot now. The voice is coming from somewhere, some physical location in the world, some transmitter attached to a building or a vehicle, or maybe even a person holding a portable radio just like mine. But where? East? West? Somewhere in the mountains? Somewhere underground? The signal shifts from night to night, sometimes strong and clear, sometimes thin and distant, like it's moving or being moved. I made a list of everything I know about the broadcasts, the times they start and end, the length of the silences between words, the way the quality of the signal changes depending on the weather, on the phase of the moon, on something I haven't been able to identify yet. I plotted it all on a piece of graph paper, drawing lines and circles and arrows that pointed toward possibilities rather than conclusions. What I came up with was a mess. A beautiful, complicated, deeply unsatisfying mess. The truth is, I don't know where the voice is coming from. I don't know if it's a single source or multiple sources, one person or a group. I don't know if the broadcasts are recorded or live, if the speaker is reading from a script or speaking from the heart. I don't know if the signal travels through conventional means or something more unusual, something Walter might have recognized if he were still here to explain it. But I know what I heard last night. After the usual opening, the phrase in that unfamiliar language, the speaker paused. Longer than usual, there was a crackling sound, like someone adjusting a dial, and then a new voice came through. Younger, rougher, speaking in the same language but with a different cadence. They seemed to be having a conversation, though I couldn't understand a word of it. Two voices trading phrases, overlapping and interrupting and talking over each other in a way that felt urgent and anxious. Then the first voice returned, and this time the English words came faster. There are others, the voice said. Other voices. Other. What is the word? Frequencies. We are not alone. We have been trying to connect, to find. Some of us are closer than you think. Some of us are far away, but we are all listening. We are all waiting. The voice paused. I could hear breathing, unsteady and quick. There is a place, a town, small. There is a station there, a radio station, like the one you are in. The people there, they have been hearing us too. They have been trying to understand. You should find them. You should talk to them. They are closer than you think. The signal started to fade, the static rising up like a tide. 4 days, the voice said, barely audible now. Remember, 4 days. Tell them. Tell everyone you can. The town, the station, the people there. They need to know. And then it was gone. And then it was gone. I sat in the dark for a long time after the signal died, trying to process what I'd heard. There are others, other voices, other people listening to the same frequency, trying to understand the same messages, waiting for the same something that I've been waiting for. And one of them, a whole group of them, is in a town that's close to here, close enough that the voice thought I could reach them. I spent the rest of the night trying to figure out which town it could be. The voice didn't give a name, didn't offer any clue that would help me identify the place. But I know this area. I've lived here long enough to know the small towns that dot the map, the ones that show up as tiny dots on the state road atlas, the ones that have gas stations and grocery stores and, yes, sometimes small radio stations that nobody outside the region has ever heard of. I started making calls. The phone lines have been down for weeks, of course, but that doesn't mean the numbers have stopped existing. I walked to the gas station this morning, found a payphone that wasn't working, and then I remembered the old rotary phone in the station's back office, the one that's been sitting on the shelf since before I started working here, covered in dust, probably not even connected to anything anymore. But I tried it anyway, and I got a dial tone. I don't know how. I don't know if the phone lines in this area are still functional, or if the exchange somehow survived whatever knocked out the rest of the grid. But the phone worked, or at least it made the sound of a phone that might be working. I tried calling a few numbers, the ones I could remember for towns within driving distance. Some of them didn't ring, some of them rang and nobody answered. But one of them, a number for a general store in a town called Millbrook, about 30 miles east, was answered by a woman who sounded like she hadn't slept in days. "Hello," she said. "Who is this? How are you calling?" "My name is Arthur," I said. "I'm a broadcaster, a radio broadcaster. I'm calling from the station in Knoxville. You might have heard some of my broadcasts, the frequency I use." There was a long pause on the other end. Then the woman spoke again, her voice quieter now, like she didn't want anyone else to hear. "We've heard you," she said. "We've been listening. Every night. My husband, he's been keeping a log. He wrote down everything you said. He thinks you might be the one who can help us understand." "Understand what?" I asked. She paused again. I could hear breathing on the other end, and something else. A humming sound, low and steady, like machinery running in the background. "The voice," she said. "The one that comes at night. The one that speaks in the other language. The one that says the word. Remember, we've been hearing it too. We've been hearing it since the beginning." I felt something shift in my chest, a release of tension I hadn't realized I was holding. "4 days," I said. "Did you hear that part?" The voice said something is coming in 4 days. Something they didn't prepare for. "Yes," she said. "We heard. That's why we've been trying to reach you. That's why I've been sitting by this phone, hoping someone would call, hoping someone would tell us what to do." "Tell me about your town," I said. "Tell me about the people there. Tell me what you've been doing since the broadcast stopped." The woman, whose name turned out to be Martha, told me Millbrook was holding together. Not easily, not perfectly, but holding. They'd organized a communal meal system, shared what food they had, pooled their resources and their knowledge. They'd found an old generator that still worked, one that powered a few essential systems, and they'd kept it running on a mix of gasoline and stubborn hope. There were children and elderly people and a retired nurse who'd become the town's de facto doctor. There were people who remembered the Cold War, who'd lived through the drills and the fears and the constant low-grade dread, and they were the ones who seemed least surprised by everything that had happened. "We always knew it could come to this," Martha said. "We just didn't think it would happen in our lifetime. But here we are. Here all of us are, trying to figure out what comes next." I told her about the map I'd been drawing, the patterns I'd been noticing, the things I still didn't understand. She listened without interrupting, occasionally murmuring agreement or asking a question that helped me clarify my own thoughts. We talked for an hour, maybe longer. Time was strange now, measured in conversations and signals rather than minutes and hours. When we finally said goodbye, she made me promise to call again tomorrow, and I made her promise to keep listening, to keep the radio on, to keep waiting for whatever the voice would tell us next. I'm sitting in the booth again now, the transmitter humming softly, the notebook open on the desk in front of me. I've added Millbrook to my map, a small dot with a circle around it, a connection to the wider network the voice keeps hinting at. I don't know if the town is the one the voice was referring to, but it feels like a step in the right direction. A thread I can pull on, a place I can reach out to, a community that's already listening to the same signal I am. The sun is setting. The sky is turning that deep purple color that happens before the stars come out. And somewhere out there, in the static and the silence, the voice is getting ready to speak again. I'll be here when it does. The voice was different last night. I'd noticed it right away, the moment the signal broke through the static. The same language, the same careful cadence, but something underneath had shifted. A weariness, maybe. A heaviness that hadn't been there before. The speaker sounded like someone who hadn't slept in a very long time, like someone who was carrying a weight they weren't sure they could hold much longer. I listened for an hour, taking notes as usual, marking the phrases I recognized and the ones I still couldn't translate. And then, about halfway through, the voice paused. There was a long silence, longer than any I'd heard before, and when the voice came back, it was speaking English, but not the careful, academic English I'd heard before. This was different, rougher, more immediate, like someone who was too tired to maintain the polite distance of a second language. "I am going to tell you something," the voice said. "Something I have not told anyone else. Something I have been carrying since the beginning." I leaned closer to the radio, my pen frozen above the notebook. "There is a tape," the voice continued. A cassette tape, old. I found it in a bunker, in a building that was supposed to be empty. It was in a box with other things, papers and photographs, and a uniform that didn't fit anyone I know. But the tape, it was different. It had a label on it, a date, a location, and a name that I did not recognize. The voice stopped. I could hear breathing, unsteady and shallow. I played the tape. I had a player, a small one, battery-powered. I had found it earlier, in a different room. The tape was old. The sound was bad, but I could hear what was on it. A voice, a different voice, speaking in English, but not like I speak. More formal, like someone reading from a document. The voice paused again. When it continued, the words came slower, like the speaker was choosing each one with care. The voice on the tape said things I did not understand. Numbers, names, coordinates, references to operations I had never heard of, protocols I did not know existed. And then, at the end, the voice said something that I have not been able to forget. It said, "If you are hearing this, then the time has come. The time they told us would never come. The time we all pretended was impossible. It is here now, and you need to know what they did, what they planned, what they never told anyone." I sat back in my chair, the notebook forgotten in my lap, the voice on the tape, another voice, another source, another piece of the puzzle I was trying to piece together. And the content of the message, the implication behind it, sent a cold feeling spreading through my chest. The voice on the radio continued. "I have been trying to understand the tape. I have been trying to decode the numbers, the names, the references. Some of it I have figured out. Some of it I have not. But what I have learned, it has changed everything. It has changed how I see what is happening. It has changed how I see what is coming." 4 days, I said aloud, though there was no one in the room to hear me. What is coming in 4 days? The voice on the radio seemed to hear me, though I knew that was impossible. Or maybe it was just coincidence, the timing of the pause and the next words. 4 days, the voice said. That is what the tape said too. 4 days until something happens. Something they planned for. Something they prepared for. Something they never told anyone about because they did not think it would ever be necessary. I stood up, suddenly unable to sit still. I paced the small booth, the radio in my hand, the voice still coming through the speaker. The people who made the tape, they were prepared for this. They had plans, they had contingencies, they had places to go and things to do and ways to survive, but they did not share those plans with anyone else. They kept them secret, classified, need to know, and now we are here, all of us, and we do not know what to do because they never told us what was coming. The voice broke off. I could hear a sound in the background, a soft clicking noise, like a door closing. I have been trying to find the places the tape mentioned, the locations, the safe zones, the places where people were supposed to go if this happened. Some of them I have found. Some of them are empty. Some of them are, I do not know how to say this. Some of them are not empty. I stopped pacing. What does that mean? I whispered. The voice came back, quieter now, almost like it was talking to itself. There are people in those places. People who knew, people who were ready, people who have been waiting for this, maybe their whole lives, and they are not like us. They are not frightened. They are not confused. They are organized. They have purpose. They have plans. And I do not know if those plans are for us or against us. The signal started to waver, the static rising up like a wave. I have to go, the voice said. I have to find more. I have to understand. But I wanted you to know. I wanted someone to know. There is a tape. There is a voice. There is a plan that we were never told about. And we have 4 days. 4 days to figure out what it means. The static surged, drowning out the voice for a moment, and then it was gone. I stood in the booth for a long time after the signal died, the radio still in my hand, the silence pressing in from all sides. A tape, A voice from the past, speaking about things that had been planned and prepared for decades ago. Plans that had never been shared, never been discussed, never been revealed to anyone outside a small circle of people who must have known what was coming. I thought about the Cold War. All those years of fear and tension, all those drills and protocols and classified documents, all those things we never knew about, never even suspected, because someone decided it was better for us to stay in the dark. And now the dark was here. The thing we'd been waiting for, the thing we'd been told would never happen, was happening. And the people who knew about it, the people who had been prepared for it, the people who had been waiting for decades, they were out there somewhere, and I didn't know if they were friends or enemies, or something in between. I've been sitting here for hours now, trying to process what I heard, trying to figure out what to do with the information. I called Martha in Millbrook this morning, told her what the voice had said. She was quiet for a long time, and when she spoke, her voice was steady in a way that surprised me. "Arthur," she said, "I don't think we can trust anyone right now. Not the voice on the radio, not the people who made the tape, not anyone who knew about this before it happened. We have to trust ourselves. We have to trust each other. That's all we can do." I think she's right. I don't know who the voice is, where it's coming from, why it's sharing this information with us. I don't know if the tape exists, if the plans exist, if any of it is real, or just the product of a frightened mind trying to make sense of an impossible situation. But I know I heard it. I know the voice said the words. And I know 4 days is not a lot of time. I'm going to keep listening. I'm going to keep reaching out to Martha, to anyone else who might be hearing the same things I'm hearing. And I'm going to try to figure out what the people on the tape knew, what they planned for, what they thought was coming. Because maybe, just maybe, knowing what they knew will help us survive what's coming next. My name is Arthur. You're listening to the radio during the Cold War. And I'm starting to realize that the Cold War never really ended. It just went underground, waiting for the moment when it would surface again. The tape is out there, the voice is out there, and somewhere, in a building or a bunker or a room I've never seen, there are people who knew all along what was coming. 4 days. I need to make them count. The frequency will come back tonight. I'll be here when it does. I couldn't stay in the station anymore. Not after last night. The walls felt too close, the silence too heavy, the weight of everything I'd heard pressing down on me like a physical thing. I needed to move. I needed to see something other than the inside of this booth, this building, this town that had become my whole world since the broadcast stopped. So I walked. I started at dawn, when the light was just beginning to seep through the clouds and the streets were still empty. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just wanted to feel the ground under my feet, the cold air on my face, the sense that I was still connected to something larger than the small room where I'd been spending all my nights. I walked past the houses with their darkened windows, past the gas station with its empty pumps, past the grocery store with its boarded-up doors. I walked through neighborhoods where nobody seemed to be awake, where the only sounds were my footsteps and the distant cry of a bird somewhere in the trees. I'd been walking for about an hour when I saw the church. It was a small building, white clapboard with a steeple that pointed toward the gray sky. The door was open, which surprised me. Most doors in town were closed now, locked tight, guarded by people who had reason to be careful. But this door was open, swinging slightly in the breeze, like an invitation. I walked up the steps and pushed the door open wider. Inside, the church was dim and quiet, lit only by the pale light filtering through stained glass windows. There were pews, maybe 20 of them, and at the front there was a simple altar with a cross on it. And there was a man, sitting in the front row, his head bowed like he was praying. He must have heard me come in, because he looked up. He was older, maybe in his 70s, with white hair and tired eyes, and a face that looked like it had seen a lot of hard days. "You must be Arthur," he said. The man from the radio station. I nodded, surprised that he knew my name. The voice told me you'd come, he said. Not the one on the radio, the other one. The one that speaks in the quiet moments, when you're not expecting it. It said someone would be walking today, someone who needed to find a place to sit and think. I stood in the aisle, unsure what to say. The man gestured toward the pew next to him, and I sat down, feeling the cool wood under my hands. I'm Father Thomas, he said. I've been the pastor here for 30 years, and I've been listening to your broadcasts, Arthur. Every single one of them. You have a radio that still works? I asked. I have an old one, he said, from before. It doesn't need much power, just a battery and a little luck, and I have a lot of time to sit and listen. There's not much else to do these days. We sat in silence for a while, the light shifting through the stained glass, casting colored patterns on the floor. I looked around the church and saw things I hadn't noticed before. A small kitchen at the back, with a stove and a table and some chairs. A stack of canned goods in the corner, neatly arranged. A cot against the wall, made up with a blanket and a pillow. You've been living here, I said. Father Thomas nodded. Since the beginning. The parishioners, they all went home to their families, to their homes. But I stayed. I thought someone should be here, in case anyone needed a place to go. And they have. People come. People talk. People bring what they can spare, and leave what they can't carry. He looked at me with those tired eyes, and I saw something in them that I hadn't expected. Hope. Not the bright, desperate kind that people cling to when they're drowning. The quiet, steady kind that comes from having lived through hard things and survived them. I've been hearing the voice too, he said. The one that speaks at night. The one that says, well, you know what it says. I've been hearing it since the beginning, just like you, and I've been trying to understand it, to make sense of what it's telling us. Do you? I asked. Understand it, I mean. Father Thomas shook his head. Not fully, not yet, but I've been thinking about the word. Remember, I've been thinking about what it means to remember in a time like this, when everything is changing, when everything we knew is gone. What is it that we're supposed to hold on to? He stood up, slowly, like his joints ached, and walked to the front of the church. He gestured for me to follow, and I did, walking up to the altar where a small book lay open. I found this in the basement, he said. It's a record book, an old one, from the 1950s, I think. It has names in it, names of people who lived here, who went to this church, who died here. People who were alive during the Cold War, when all of this was just a possibility, a shadow on the horizon. And I've been reading it, learning their stories, remembering them. I looked down at the book. The handwriting was careful, precise. The ink faded to brown. Names and dates and small notes about marriages and births and deaths. A record of a community that had existed long before I was born, long before any of this happened. I think that's what the voice wants us to do, Father Thomas said. Remember, not just the big things, the events, the dates, but the small things, the people, the connections, the things that make us human, that make us more than just survivors. That's what we're supposed to hold on to. That's what we're supposed to carry with us, through whatever comes next. I stood there in the quiet church, looking at that book, thinking about all the people who had passed through this town over the decades, all the lives, all the stories, all the memories that had accumulated like layers of sediment. I don't know if I can do that, I said. I don't know if I have the strength to hold on to all of it. There's so much, and it's all so heavy, and I feel like I'm barely holding on as it is. Father Thomas put a hand on my shoulder. You don't have to hold it all, he said. None of us do. That's the point. We share it. We carry it together. You carry what you can, and I carry what I can. And Martha in Millbrook carries what she can. And all of us together, we hold on to what matters. I looked at him, and I felt something shift inside me. A release, maybe. A letting go of some of the weight I'd been carrying since the first night I heard the frequency. The voice said 4 days, I said. Something is coming. Something they planned for. something they never told anyone about. I don't know what it is. I don't know if I should be afraid or prepared or both. I think you should be both, Father Thomas said. Fear is honest. It's real. It's a sign that you understand what's at stake. And preparation is what you do with that understanding. You take the fear and you turn it into something useful. You keep listening, you keep talking, you keep holding on to the people around you. We stood together in the quiet church, the light shifting around us, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not peace exactly, that was too strong a word, but something close, a sense of being in the right place, at the right time, with the right person. I stayed at the church for a few more hours, helping Father Thomas organize the supplies he'd gathered, listening to his stories about the town and its people. When I finally left, the sun was starting to set, and I felt better than I had in days. The walk back to the station was different. The streets were still quiet, the houses still dark, but I wasn't seeing them the same way. I was seeing them as places where people lived, people who had memories and stories and connections to each other. People who were trying to hold on, just like me. I thought about what Father Thomas had said, about carrying what we can and sharing the rest, about remembering the small things, the human things, the things that make this world worth surviving in. I don't know if that's what the voice meant when it said remember. I don't know if the plan, the one the tape mentioned, the one that's been waiting all these years, is something I should be preparing for, or something I should be afraid of. But I know I'm not alone in this. I know there are people out there, people like Father Thomas and Martha, and the other voices I'm starting to find, people who are carrying what they can and sharing what they can't. That's what I'm going to hold on to tonight. That's what I'm going to carry with me, through the dark and the static and the waiting. My name is Arthur. You're listening to the radio during the Cold War, and I'm starting to understand that remembering isn't just about the past. It's about the present. It's about the people we're with right now, the connections we're making, the things we're choosing to hold on to. Father Thomas gave me something before I left the church, an old map, yellowed and creased, that he'd found in the basement alongside the record book. It was a military map, the kind that used to be classified, the kind that showed things regular maps didn't show. Bunkers, supply routes, evacuation corridors, places that weren't supposed to exist, marked with symbols I didn't recognize. I found it in a box, he said, along with some other things, documents mostly, reports about readiness levels and contingency protocols. I don't understand most of it, but I thought you might. I spread the map out on the station floor, weighing down the corners with books and coffee mugs. It was larger than I'd expected, covering a region that stretched from the coast to the mountains, with our town marked as a small dot near the center, and radiating outward from that dot, in neat, precise lines, were routes and locations that told a story I was only beginning to understand. The bunkers were the first thing I noticed. There were dozens of them, scattered across the region like seeds planted in a field. Some were close to major cities, positioned to serve as command centers or evacuation points. Others were in remote areas, hidden in forests or buried in hillsides, placed where nobody would think to look. And there, in the middle of it all, was our town, surrounded by at least 5 of these locations, each one marked with a symbol I couldn't decipher. I spent the morning studying the map, tracing the lines with my finger, trying to understand the logic behind the placements. Some of it made sense. The routes followed highways and back roads. The bunkers were positioned at strategic intervals. The evacuation corridors pointed toward areas that would be safer in the event of an attack. But other parts of the map were more mysterious, symbols that had no explanation in the key. Areas that were marked with a red circle and a date. Notes in the margins, written in handwriting that was different from the main text, like someone had added their own observations to the official document. I called Martha in Millbrook and told her what I'd found. She listened without interrupting, and when I was finished, She asked me to describe the symbols in detail. There's one that looks like a triangle with a circle inside it, I said. It's marked in 5 places, all near our town. And there's another one, a square with a line through it, that's marked near the coast. I don't know what they mean. I might, she said. My husband, before he passed, he used to work for the government. Not in the military exactly, more like logistics, planning. He used to talk about places like that, places that were set up for emergencies, for situations where the normal systems broke down. He said there were more of them than anyone knew, hundreds, maybe thousands, scattered across the country. And he said the people who built them, they never told anyone where they were. They kept the location secret, even from the people who were supposed to use them. I looked at the map again, at the 5 symbols near our town, and felt a chill run through me. There are people in some of them, I said, repeating what the voice had told me. People who knew about this, people who were waiting. Martha was quiet for a moment. Arthur, I don't think those people are the ones we need to worry about. I think the ones we need to worry about are the ones who are still out there, the ones who didn't have a plan, the ones who are scared and desperate and looking for someone to blame, the ones who don't know what they're going to do when the 4 days are up. I thought about that for a long time, about the people in the town, the people I'd seen walking through the streets, the people who were still trying to hold their lives together. They weren't part of any secret plan. They didn't have a bunker to go to or a contingency to follow. They had each other, and whatever supplies they could gather, and the hope that someone, somewhere, would tell them what to do. That's where I came in. The voice on the radio. The person who was listening, translating, trying to make sense of the fragments of information that came through the static. If I could figure out what the 4 days meant, if I could understand what the plan was and who it was for, I could tell the people in the town. I could help them prepare. I could give them something to hold on to besides fear. The afternoon passed slowly. I made notes on the map, copying the symbols into my notebook, trying to cross-reference them with what the voice had told me. I listened to the static, hoping for a signal, but the frequency stayed silent. It was too early. The voice didn't come until night. I went to the grocery store, the one that was boarded up, and knocked on the door. A face appeared in a crack between the boards, a man I recognized from the town, someone who used to stock shelves and sweep floors before everything changed. Arthur, he said, what are you doing here? I need to talk to you, I said, about what's coming, about the 4 days, about the bunkers and the plan and the voice on the radio. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he unlatched the door and let me in. The store was dark inside, lit only by a few candles on the counter. There were other people there, maybe a dozen of them, sitting on crates and boxes, their faces shadowed and tired. They all looked at me as I came in, and I realized they'd been waiting for me. They knew who I was. They'd heard my broadcasts. Tell us, someone said. Tell us what you know. I stood in the middle of the store, surrounded by these people I'd known my whole life, and I told them everything, about the frequency and the voice and the tape, about the map I'd found and the symbols I couldn't understand, about the 4 days and the plan and the people who were out there, waiting in their bunkers, prepared for something none of us had been prepared for. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then the store owner, the man who had let me in, spoke up. We've been hearing things, he said. Rumors, mostly. People talking about a place in the hills, where there's a building that's been sealed up for years. They say it's a bunker, that it was built during the Cold War, that it's full of supplies and equipment. And they say there are people there, people who've been there for a long time. Have you seen them? I asked. Have you talked to them? No, but we've seen lights, at night, in the hills. Lights that move, that don't look like campfires or lanterns. And we've heard things too. Voices in the distance. Not like the voice on the radio. Different, harder, like they're not trying to connect, like they're just watching. I felt that cold feeling again, the one that had been spreading through my chest since I first heard the voice mention the tape. "I need to go there," I said. "I need to see it for myself. I need to know who they are and what they want." The store owner shook his head. "Arthur, that's dangerous. We don't know who they are. We don't know what they'll do if they find out we're watching them." "I know," I said, "but I have to try." The voice said 4 days. That's not much time. And if there's someone out there who knows what's coming, someone who's been preparing for it all this time, I need to find them. I need to ask them what they know. I left the store a few minutes later, walking back through the dark streets toward the station. The sky was clear above me, the stars bright and cold. Somewhere in those hills, there were people with answers, people who'd been waiting for this moment, maybe their whole lives. I didn't know if they were the ones I should be afraid of, or the ones I should be seeking out, but I knew I couldn't stay here and wait. Not anymore. Not with the 4 days pressing down on me like a weight I could barely carry. Tonight, when the frequency comes, I'll listen. I'll take notes. I'll try to understand. And then, when the broadcast ends, I'll make a plan. I'll find a way to reach those people in the hills, the ones who've been watching and waiting, the ones who might have the answers I've been looking for. I left before dawn. There was no point waiting. The frequency had come last night, as it always did, but the voice had been different, quieter, more distant, like the speaker was already somewhere else, already moving toward whatever was coming. I'd listened for 2 hours, taking notes, trying to catch every word, but the signal had faded earlier than usual, leaving me with more questions than answers. The only thing I'd been sure of was that I couldn't stay in the station any longer. The walk to the hills took most of the morning. I followed the old road that led out of town past the last houses and the last fields, into the country that had always seemed empty and peaceful from a distance. Now it felt different. The trees seemed closer together, the shadows deeper, the silence heavier. I kept my eyes on the hills ahead, the ones where the store owner had said the lights appeared. I didn't have much with me, a backpack with some water and a few cans of food, the portable radio, wrapped in cloth to protect it, the map Father Thomas had given me, folded carefully in my pocket, and a small flashlight, the kind that ran on batteries I couldn't replace. The road turned to dirt, then to gravel, then to nothing but a path worn by animals and time. I kept walking, following the map as best I could, heading toward the symbol that was closest to our town, the triangle with the circle inside it, the one that had been marked so carefully on the yellowed paper. It took me 4 hours to find it. The bunker was hidden in the side of a hill, covered in earth and overgrown with brush. If I hadn't known what to look for, I would have walked right past it. But there it was, a metal door set into the hillside, painted to match the surrounding rock. The door was closed, sealed tight, and there was no sign that anyone had been there recently. I stood in front of the door for a long time, trying to decide what to do. I'd come all this way, walked through miles of empty country, and now I was standing in front of what might be the answer to everything I'd been trying to understand. But the door was closed, and I had no way to open it. I was about to turn back when I heard a sound. Behind me, somewhere in the trees, a branch snapped. I spun around, my heart hammering, but there was nothing there, just the trees and the shadows and the silence that had been following me all morning. Then I heard a voice, low and calm, coming from somewhere to my left. "You shouldn't be here." I turned toward the voice, my hands raised, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. A figure stepped out from behind a tree, a man in his 40s or 50s, wearing clothes that looked like they'd been chosen for function rather than fashion. He had a rifle slung over his shoulder, but it wasn't pointed at me, yet. "I'm Arthur," I said, "from the radio station. I've been broadcasting for weeks, trying to connect with people. The voice, the one that comes at night, the one that speaks in the other language, I've been listening to it, trying to understand. And I found this map, and it led me here." The man studied me for a long moment. His face was hard to read, but there was something in his eyes that looked like recognition. "We've heard your broadcasts," he said. "All of us. We've been waiting for you to find us." "Waiting?" I said. "You knew I was coming?" The man nodded. "The voice told us. Not the one you hear on the radio. The other one. The one that comes through sometimes, when the signal is right. It said you'd be coming. It said you'd have questions." I felt a chill run through me. The other voice. The one I'd heard on the tape. The one that had been speaking in English about the plans and the preparations. The one that had been waiting all this time. "Who are you?" I asked. "What is this place? What's going to happen in 4 days?" The man looked at me for a long time, and then he gestured toward the door in the hillside. "Come inside," he said. "I'll show you." The door opened with a grinding sound, metal scraping against metal, and I followed the man into the darkness. The corridor beyond was narrow, lined with pipes and cables, lit by a dim yellow light that seemed to come from nowhere. We walked for a few minutes, the sound of our footsteps echoing off the walls, and then the corridor opened into a larger room. It was a command center. That was the only way to describe it. A room filled with equipment, some of it old, some of it newer, all of it connected by a web of wires and cables. There were screens on the walls, flickering with static, and a console in the center with chairs arranged around it. The room smelled of dust and metal and something else, something I couldn't identify. "This is one of the bunkers," the man said. "One of many. They were built during the Cold War as part of a program called Continuity of Government. The idea was that if the worst happened, if the country came under attack, there would be places like this where people could go, where they could continue to function, to lead, to maintain order." "But you're not government," I said. "You're not military. You're just people." The man smiled, a thin, tired smile. "We were people who knew about this place, people who had connections, who understood what was coming. When the broadcast stopped, when the power failed, we made our way here. Some of us had been preparing for this our whole lives. Others just followed. They heard the voice, the same one you've been hearing, and they came here looking for answers." I looked around the room, at the equipment, and the cables and the screens full of static. "What's going to happen in 4 days?" I asked again. What did the voice mean? The man's face grew serious. He walked to the console and pressed a few buttons, and one of the screens flickered to life. It showed a map, similar to the one I'd found, but with more detail, more symbols, more lines and arrows and dates. 4 days from now, he said, there is going to be a broadcast, a worldwide broadcast, on every frequency, every channel, every signal that still works. And on that broadcast, someone is going to speak. Someone who has been waiting a very long time to say what they have to say. Who? I asked. Who is going to speak? The man shook his head. We don't know. We've never known. All we know is that the broadcast is coming, that it was planned decades ago, and that the people who planned it have been waiting for this moment ever since. I stood there in the dim light of the bunker, trying to absorb what he'd told me. A worldwide broadcast, a message that had been waiting, planned, prepared for decades. A voice that would speak to everyone, everywhere, all at once. What will it say? I asked. The man looked at me with those tired eyes. We don't know that either. But we think it's the reason the voice has been telling us to remember. We think there's something we're supposed to know, something we're supposed to hold on to, something that will make sense when we hear the broadcast. I thought about Father Thomas and the record book, about Martha in Millbrook and her husband's stories, about the people in the grocery store, waiting for someone to tell them what to do, about all the voices I'd heard, the ones on the radio and the ones in my head, the ones that had been telling me the same thing over and over. Remember. What am I supposed to do? I asked. What can I do? The man put a hand on my shoulder. Keep broadcasting, he said. Keep telling people what you've learned. Keep connecting the ones who are listening. the ones who are trying to understand. And when the broadcast comes, when the voice speaks, listen, really listen, because that's what remembering means. It means paying attention. It means holding on to what matters. I stayed in the bunker for a few more hours, learning what I could, asking questions that didn't always have answers. When I finally left, the sun was setting, and I had a long walk back to town. The walk back was different from the walk out. I was tired, yes, and hungry, and sore from all the walking. But I was also carrying something I hadn't had before, a purpose, a sense that what I was doing mattered, that the broadcasts I'd been making, the connections I'd been building, were part of something larger. The voice had been telling us to remember, and now I understood why. We needed to remember because something was coming, something that had been planned for decades, something that would change everything. And when it came, we needed to be ready. I reached the station just as the sky was growing dark. I went inside, turned on the transmitter, and sat down in the booth. The frequency would come soon, the voice would speak, and I would listen. The morning came gray and still, like the whole world was holding its breath. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the night in the booth, listening to the static, waiting for the frequency that never came. For the first time since the broadcasts had started, the voice was silent. No signal, no words. No reminder to remember, just the empty hiss of a world that had gone quiet at the worst possible moment. I called Martha in Millbrook. The phone rang for a long time before she answered, and when she did, her voice was strained. "Arthur," she said, "we've lost it too. The frequency, the voice, everything. It's been silent since last night. We don't know why. I think it's because the broadcast is coming," I said. "The one the man in the bunker told me about. I think the voice has said everything it needed to say. Now it's waiting, like the rest of us." Martha was quiet for a moment. "What do we do?" "I don't know," I said. "I think we just wait and listen. And when the broadcast comes, we try to understand what it means." I spent the morning walking through town, talking to people, telling them what I'd learned. The reaction was mixed. Some listened carefully, asking questions, trying to piece together the fragments of information I was giving them. Others just stared, their eyes hollow, too tired or too frightened to process what I was saying. Father Thomas was at the church, as he always was. He listened to my story without interrupting, and when I finished, he nodded slowly. "So this is it," he said. "The thing we've been waiting for. The thing the voice has been preparing us for." "I think so," I said. "I think tonight something is going to happen. Something that changes everything." He put a hand on my shoulder, the same gesture he'd used the first time we met. "Then we should be ready. All of us. We should gather together. The people who are still here. The ones who are still listening. We should be together when it happens." I spent the afternoon doing exactly that. I went from house to house, from store to store, from the gas station to the library, telling people to come to the church at sunset. I didn't tell them what they'd hear. I didn't tell them what was coming. I just told them to come, to be together, to not be alone when the broadcast began. By the time the sun started to set, the church was full. Dozens of people, more than I'd seen gathered together since the world had gone quiet. They sat in the pews, their faces lit by the candles that flickered on the altar, and they waited. I stood at the front of the church, next to Father Thomas, and looked out at the crowd. I saw faces I recognized, people I'd known my whole life. I saw faces I didn't recognize, people who had walked in from other towns, other places, following the same thread of connection that had brought us all here. Martha was there, sitting in the front row with a small group from Millbrook. She smiled when she saw me, a tired smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, but it was something, a sign that we were in this together. The man from the bunker was there too, standing in the back, his face unreadable. He'd brought others with him, People in the same practical clothes with the same careful eyes. They stood apart from the rest of the crowd, watching, waiting. The church fell silent as the last light faded from the sky. The candles flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. And somewhere in the distance, I heard the first crackle of static. It was faint at first, barely audible, like a whisper from a great distance. But it grew, slowly, steadily, until everyone in the church could hear it. The sound of a signal, finally breaking through the silence. The frequency was coming back. I turned toward the sound, toward the radio I'd brought with me. The same portable radio that had been with me since the first night I'd heard the voice. The static was shifting, taking shape, becoming something more than just noise. And then the broadcast began. It wasn't the voice I'd been hearing. It was different, deeper, older. The voice of someone who had been waiting a very long time to speak. "My name is not important," the voice said. "What is important is what I have to tell you. You have been listening, you have been waiting, and now, finally, the time has come." The voice paused, and I could feel the church holding its breath. Everyone was leaning forward, straining to catch every word. Years ago, before most of you were born, there was a plan. A plan for what would happen if the world changed, if the systems we relied on stopped working, if the governments we trusted failed us. That plan was kept secret, hidden away in places like the one you found. It was a plan for survival, for continuity, for rebuilding. But it was also a plan for something else. Something that was never meant to be shared. The voice paused again, and I heard something in the background, a sound I couldn't identify. Machinery, maybe, or breathing, or both. The plan was that when the time came, when the world had fallen quiet, someone would speak. Someone would tell the truth. Someone would say what had been hidden for so long. And that someone is me. I looked at Martha, at Father Thomas, at the man from the bunker. They were all listening, their faces intent, their eyes fixed on the radio. "The truth is this," the voice said. "The Cold War never ended. It went underground. It changed shape, changed form, but it never stopped. The fear, the tension, the preparation for the worst, it all continued, even when the world was told otherwise. And now, finally, the worst has come. The systems have failed. The governments are silent. And we are all that's left." I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. The voice was saying things I'd been thinking, things I'd been afraid to say out loud, but hearing them spoken by someone else, by someone who had been waiting to speak them, made them feel more real. "You are not alone," the voice continued. "There are others, like you, scattered across the world, listening to the same silence, waiting for the same answers. You are part of something larger than yourselves, a network of survivors, of people who remembered, who held on, who refused to let go." The voice paused, and when it spoke again, there was something different in its tone, something that sounded almost like hope. "This is not the end. This is the beginning of something new, something built on the pieces of what came before. It will be hard, it will be painful, but it will be yours. Yours to shape, yours to build, yours to carry forward." The broadcast went on for another hour. The voice spoke of plans and places, of resources and connections, of things that had been hidden and were now being shared. It gave instructions, coordinates, ways to find the other bunkers, the other survivors, the other pieces of the network that had been waiting for this moment. When it finally ended, there was a long silence in the church. Then, slowly, people began to stir. They looked at each other, at the radio, at me, and I saw something in their eyes that I hadn't seen in weeks. Purpose. The man from the bunker walked to the front of the church, and I saw that he was carrying a map, similar to the one Father Thomas had given me. He spread it out on the altar, and the crowd gathered around, looking at the symbols and the lines and the coordinates that the voice had just described. "This is where we go," he said. "These are the places we need to reach. There are others out there, like us, waiting to them come together, sharing information, making plans. It was strange, seeing them like this, after so many weeks of silence and waiting. They were different now, more focused, less afraid. Father Thomas came to stand beside me. "It's happening," he said. "The thing we were waiting for. It's finally happening." I nodded, not trusting my voice. The broadcast had been more than I'd expected, more than I'd hoped for. It had given us something to hold on to, a direction, a purpose, a reason to keep going. The frequency was quiet now, the static fading into silence. But the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of possibilities, full of connections, full of the future we were about to build. My name is Arthur. You're listening to the radio during the Cold War, and the world has just changed again. The broadcast is over, but our work is just beginning. 2 days after the broadcast, I started walking north. It wasn't an easy decision. The town had become home in ways I hadn't expected. The station, the booth, the familiar hum of the transmitter, all of it had become part of who I was. But the voice had given coordinates, and the man from the bunker had confirmed them. There was another facility to the north, another bunker with more supplies, more equipment, more people who were waiting to connect. Martha had decided to stay in Millbrook. Her people needed her, she said, and she was right. The network was growing, but it needed anchors, people who could hold things together in the places where the roots had already taken hold. She promised to keep the radio on, to keep listening, to keep sharing whatever she learned. Father Thomas was coming with me. He'd made that decision the night of the broadcast, and nothing I'd said had changed his mind. "I've been in this town for 30 years, he told me. I've buried the dead, married the living, held the hands of the dying. I've done my work here. Now there's other work to do, other people to help. And I'm not going to sit in a church and wait for the world to come to me." There were others too. A young woman named Elena, who'd been a nurse before everything changed. A man named James, who'd been a mechanic, the kind who could fix anything with moving parts. A family of 5 whose farm had been too exposed, too vulnerable to stay. And the man from the bunker, whose name I still didn't know, who had agreed to guide us to the northern facility. We left at dawn, a small caravan of people carrying what we could, walking toward a destination we'd only seen on maps. The road north was old, a 2-lane highway that wound through fields and forests, past farms that had been abandoned and towns that had gone silent. We walked in silence for the first few hours, each of us lost in our own thoughts, processing everything that had happened. It was Elena who broke the silence. She was walking beside me, her pack slung over her shoulders, her eyes scanning the tree line like she was looking for something. "Arthur," she said, "what do you think the broadcast meant? Really meant?" I thought about it for a moment. I think it meant exactly what it said. That the Cold War never ended. That there were plans in place. Plans that were kept secret. Plans that were meant to be activated if the worst happened. And now the worst has happened, and we're supposed to be part of whatever comes next. Elena nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that, about how we got here, all of us. The people who knew about the bunkers, the ones who were prepared. They had information we didn't have. They had a head start. But the voice on the broadcast, it said the plan was for everyone, not just the ones who knew. Everyone who survived. "That's what I believe," I said. "I think the system was designed to be activated when the time came. The bunkers, the supplies, the network, it was all supposed to help us rebuild. Not just the government, not just the military, all of us." Elena was quiet for a moment, and then she said something that made me stop walking. "Arthur, what if the plan wasn't meant to help us? What if it was meant to control us?" I turned to look at her. Her face was serious, her eyes sharp. "Think about it," she said. "The voice on the broadcast told us exactly where to go, exactly what to do. It gave us instructions, coordinates, a system to follow. But who made that system? Who decided what would happen after the worst came? And why did they keep it secret for so long? I stood there on the side of the road, the morning sun warming my face, and I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I hadn't thought about it that way. I'd been so relieved to have direction, to have purpose, that I hadn't stopped to question the source. I don't know, I said. I don't know who made the plan or why they kept it secret, but I know the voice on the broadcast, the one who spoke to us. It didn't sound like someone who wanted to control us. It sounded like someone who wanted to help. Elena nodded, but I could see that she wasn't fully convinced. Maybe you're right, but I think we need to be careful. I think we need to question what we're told, even when it comes from a voice on the radio. Maybe especially when it comes from a voice on the radio. We walked in silence for a while after that, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The road stretched ahead, disappearing into the forest, and I thought about what Elena had said. She was right to be cautious. We'd survived this long by being careful, by questioning, by not accepting easy answers. And even though the broadcast had given us a direction, that didn't mean we should stop questioning. The northern facility was supposed to be a day's walk away, maybe a little more. The man from the bunker had been there before. He said, a long time ago, before the world changed. He knew the way, knew the terrain, knew what we would find when we got there. We should reach it by tomorrow afternoon, he said, falling into step beside me. There's a place we can stop for the night, about halfway, an old hunting cabin. I used it on my last trip up here. I nodded, grateful for the information. My feet were already sore, and the weight of the pack was starting to wear on my shoulders. Thank you, I said, for guiding us, for sharing what you know. The man looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. A flicker of emotion, quickly hidden. I've been waiting for this, he said, for a long time, waiting for someone to come, someone to listen, someone to understand. When I heard your broadcasts, when I heard the way you talked to people, the way you shared what you'd learned, I knew you were the one who could help bring everyone together. I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't feel like the one. I felt like someone who'd stumbled into something larger than himself, someone who was just trying to keep his head above water. I'm just a broadcaster, I said. I just talk into a microphone and hope someone's listening. The man smiled, a thin, tired smile. That's exactly what we need. Someone who talks, someone who connects, someone who reminds people that they're not alone. We walked on, the road winding through the forest, the sun climbing higher in the sky. I thought about the voice on the broadcast, about the words it had spoken. This is not the end. This is the beginning. It felt true, sitting here on this road, walking towards something unknown. It felt like we were starting something new, something that had been waiting for us all along. I thought about the people we'd left behind in the town, Martha and Millbrook, keeping the connection alive, the people in the grocery store, gathering their supplies, making their plans, the network that was growing, spreading out from a single voice on a radio frequency. And I thought about the voice itself, the one that had started it all, the one that had told us to remember, night after night, in a language I still didn't fully understand. I wondered if they knew what they'd started. I wondered if they knew how far their words had traveled, how many people they'd reached. We reached the hunting cabin at sunset. It was small and dusty, but it had a roof and walls, and that was enough. We built a fire in the stone hearth and sat around it, passing a can of beans between us, telling stories about the world that was. I listened to their voices, the rise and fall of their words, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, belonging. The northern facility was still a day away, but for now, sitting around this fire with these people, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. We reached the northern facility at noon the next day. It was larger than the first bunker, built into the side of a mountain, the entrance hidden behind a steel door that looked like it could withstand almost anything. The man from the bunker produced a key from somewhere in his coat, a heavy metal thing that felt ancient and important, and turned it in the lock. The door swung open with a groan, revealing a corridor that led into the mountain. We stood at the entrance for a long moment, looking into the darkness, and then the man stepped forward and turned on a light. Dim yellow bulbs flickered to life, casting long shadows on the walls. "Follow me," he said. "Be careful. It's been a while since anyone's been here." We walked through the corridor in silence, our footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. The air was cold and still, smelling of dust and metal and something else, something that reminded me of the old library in town, the smell of stored knowledge, of things that had been waiting for someone to find them. The corridor opened into a larger room, a space that was bigger than the command center in the first bunker. There were tables with maps on them, walls lined with shelves full of boxes, and at the far end, a bank of radios and monitors that flickered with the same static I'd been listening to for weeks. "This is the main facility," the man said. "This is where it was all supposed to happen. The coordination, the communication, the rebuilding, everything we need is here." I walked slowly through the room, taking it all in. The maps on the tables showed the entire region, with symbols and markings that I was starting to understand. The boxes on the shelves were labeled with dates and locations, the names of places I'd never heard of, and the radios, the monitors, they were all connected to something larger, something that was still out there, still waiting. Elena was already moving toward the boxes, opening one, pulling out a stack of papers. James was examining the equipment, running his hands over the consoles like he was greeting old friends. Father Thomas stood in the center of the room, looking at everything with a quiet reverence. "This is it," he said. "This is what we were supposed to find." I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The room was too quiet, too still, like it had been waiting for us to arrive, but wasn't sure what to do with us, now that we were here. "The broadcast," I said, "the one that told us to come here, is that being transmitted from this facility?" The man from the bunker shook his head. "No, that broadcast came from somewhere else, somewhere I don't know. The facility we were in before, the one you found, that was just an outpost, a connection point. The broadcast came from the center, from the source, and I don't know where the source is." I felt that cold knot form in my stomach again. The voice on the broadcast had given us coordinates, had told us to come here, but the broadcast itself hadn't originated from this place. It had come from somewhere else, somewhere unknown. "So we're still in the dark," I said. "We still don't know who's really in charge." The man looked at me, and I saw that same flicker of emotion in his eyes. "We were never supposed to know," he said. "That was the point. The plan was designed so that no one person knew everything. Everyone had a piece, and the pieces only came together when the time was right. We're here because the time is right. The rest will come in its own time." I wanted to ask more questions, to push for answers, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the look on the man's face. Maybe it was the weight of everything we'd been through. Maybe it was the simple fact that I was tired, that we were all tired, and that some questions didn't have answers. We spent the rest of the day exploring the facility, cataloging what we found, making sense of the pieces that had been left for us. There was food and water, enough to last us for months. There were medical supplies, tools, equipment, and there were files, boxes and boxes of files, filled with information about the network, about the bunkers, about the plan. That evening, we gathered in the main room, the same room where we'd first arrived. The man from the bunker stood by the map table, his face illuminated by the dim light. "I know you have questions," he said. "I know you want to understand, and I'm going to tell you what I can. But some of it I don't know. Some of it I was never told. That's the way it was designed." He told us about the network, how it had been created during the height of the Cold War, how it had been maintained by a small group of people who passed the knowledge down through generations. He told us about the bunkers, the supplies, the equipment. And he told us about the broadcast, the one that had been waiting all these years, the one that had finally been activated. The broadcast was meant to be the trigger, he said, the signal that the time had come. But the broadcast itself, the voice on it, that was recorded a long time ago, before any of us were born. The voice you heard, it's the voice of someone who was there at the beginning, someone who knew what was coming. I thought about the voice, the deep, measured tone, the words that had been so carefully chosen. It was the voice of someone who had been planning for decades, someone who had seen the future and tried to prepare for it. So the plan was always going to happen, I said, even if the world had never changed, even if the Cold War had ended differently. The man nodded. The plan was always there. It was a hedge, a backup, a way to ensure that something would survive no matter what. The people who made it, they weren't trying to control us. They were trying to give us a chance. I looked around the room, at the people who had followed me here, the ones who had trusted me enough to make this journey. They were tired, yes, and uncertain, but they were also hopeful. The broadcast had given them something to hold on to. The facility had given them a place to be, and the plan, whatever its flaws, had given them a direction. Tomorrow, I said, we start making this place work. We start connecting with the other facilities, the other bunkers. We start building the network that the plan was designed for. It won't be easy, but it's what we have to do. Pantry. The room was quiet for a moment, and then Father Thomas spoke. You're right, he said. That's what we need to do. But I think we also need to remember something. Something that's easy to forget when we're building plans and making networks. What's that? I asked. Remember why we're doing this, he said. Remember the people who aren't here. The ones who didn't survive. The ones who are still out there, waiting for someone to tell them what to do. We're not just building for ourselves. We're building for all of them. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. He was right. The plan was important. The network was important, but none of it meant anything if we forgot why we were doing it. That night, I sat in the main room with the portable radio, listening to the static. The frequency was still silent, the voice still absent, but I knew it would come back. It would come back when it was ready, when the time was right. I thought about the road north, about the people I'd met, about the journey we'd all made. I thought about the town I'd left behind, about Martha and the others, about the connections that were still being built. And I thought about the voice, the one that had started it all, the one that had told us to remember. The door to the facility was open, and through it, I could see the stars beginning to appear in the sky. They were the same stars I'd seen from the station, the same stars that had been there through everything. Somewhere out there, other people were listening, other people were waiting, and someday we would find them. My name is Arthur. You're listening to the radio during the Cold War, and this is the beginning. The journey continues, the network grows, and we remember.